those reaction style rods, like Brian talked about, with like chatterbaits and crankbaits, some of the best ones are sub $100. They just
I was
are.
going to get into that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I was literally I'm glad you jogged my memory on that. Um, but yes, yes. Go ahead. I'll let you continue before I get in there because I will preach on that for a long time. Uh,
No, and that's kind of where I wanted to leave it. I mean, exact point, case in point is Kyle Welcher. You know, he loves throwing a little flat side around. He absolutely loves it, and so does Gerald Swindle. And the two of them called me up. It was within a day of each other. It was flat side season, going up and down the banks, doing that whole deal. And they both called me and said, "Yo, what's with this Fate rod at like $80? It's like
yep,
the
yep,
best period ever flat sided rod I've ever used. It's $80."
yep.
And like they were mind blown. Like they were just super excited about it because it's, you know, they can recommend it to anybody and anybody can afford it. So
Yes,
don't rule it out because it's sub $100 or whatever your.
yes,
Yeah.
yep. So that one thing that's definitely been my experience when you start to get into a lot of these expensive rods, the materials that they're made out of to make them lighter or whatever the case may be,
Faster.
those rods end up being a lot more fragile. I'm a very rough person on my rods. I step on them, like I don't know how, I don't know. I'm rough on rods. I don't like to, and I listen. I have access to the most expensive. I could use a $1,200 setup if I needed to. I think I have two that are 800 to 900 bucks because the cheaper materials are more durable because like what Ricky just said, they have to use more material. There's more graphite in that rod. So it's actually in so many ways, it's a better rod. It will hold up to more abuse because it's just like it's got more graphite in it. It's got more material in it. It lasts better. It does things better. My favorite spinnerbait rod is a $99 rod. It's actually 89.99. 89.99. It's a favorite Defender. That's my favorite spinnerbait rod there is. Even my signature rod, I think it's $150. This one's a composite, and then the other one's a graphite composite. Like it's they those rods work. They don't tear up. I broke two of them. One of them I slammed in a van door, and then the other one I stepped on. I broke two of them in
They
three
all break that
years.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll break. They're going to break. Yeah, all rods
Yeah.
break, and they're going to break. But like if I get a $400 or $500 rod, I will have that rod broke pretty fastly. Like I'm going to break it. So yeah, like Ricky said, don't be scared to buy. Like I don't care how serious you are fishing. Do not be scared to look at those $70, $80 rods. There is a lot. A $70, $80 rod now is not what it was 20 years ago.
No.
It is not like this. The technology they have in rod building now, there's legit 78, $80 rods. And so rods and reels, I don't leave anything on the table. I will spend what I have to spend to get what I need to get. And if I'm using it, I think highly of it. So yeah, most of the rods, there's only one rod on my deck that's over. It's $200 plus. It's this one, the hex. I think it's like $400. It's my only flipping rod. It's $400. The rest of them are $150, 89 to $150. So don't be scared of that. 2 or 3 setups. You really want to have like 2 or 3 bait caster setups. This is what I would tell you to buy. I tell you to get something sub 7 foot in a medium power. It can be like a fast moderate, something like that. 6'8", 6'10". What you're going to use that rod for is like a jerk bait. Going to use that rod for like a popper style top water. You could use it for sometimes you can throw like a finesse swim bait on that if you want to. I'd also tell you to get a medium heavy fast 7'3" for absolutely freaking everything that's ever existed for fishing. 7'2", 7'3". If you want one rod to do, like if you just apocalypse happened tomorrow and we didn't have any more fishing tackle, get you a 7'2", 7'3", medium heavy, fast. I'll use it for frogging. I'll use it for a Carolina rig. I'll use it for Texas rig. I'll flip with it. I'll cast. I'll throw big top waters on it. Everything. 7'2", 7'3", medium heavy, fast. I mean, I'll share with you guys that I know one thing I promise you is that I would give you guys like sort of like a mini guide if you're looking to buy a rod or reel for Christmas. I have. We'll talk about reels since that's what we're on. Pretty much, you can see this is. I literally just grabbed this out of my boat. This is a 6:8 gear ratio reel. This is the C2 Concept C2, and this is my cranking rod for like balsa baits. I like a 6:8 gear ratio reel. My spinner baits 6:8. I just feel like I got better control with that gear ratio reel. When I start doing like single hook stuff, I like the faster ones, 7.3, 7.5s, whatever your favorite reel manufacturer produces. I feel like that's better. Even sometimes the eights, but I feel like if you want to buy a reel and you want to do just about everything, you're pretty safe with 7.3 1, 7.5 1. Everybody wants to get better at fishing. One of the things that you always hear about getting better at fishing is spending more time on the water. What if I told you you really don't have to spend more time on the water to get better? Because I know what you're dealing with. You go to work Monday through Friday, you work 8 to 5. From 5 to dark, you take your kids to practice soccer, baseball, whatever the case may be, football, whatever it is for you. Then you figure out what you're going to eat for dinner. You get everybody bathing in bed and you start that process over again for the next day. You don't have any more time. Your capacity is stretched when it comes to being on the water. But what if I told you you really don't have to spend more time on the water to win your club tournament, to take your friends fishing and just have a good time, just to go out there and feel confident when you launch your boat or you take your hike to the river? It doesn't take more time, it takes more deliberate time and more deliberate practice. When you pull up to the water, you want to know exactly what to look for. You want to know exactly what gear to use. When you figure out those two things, you're on your way to having more fun and catching more fish. Listen, I have an online course that will teach you everything you need to know, where to go, what to look for. You'll be more confident when you're out there on the water. If you're interested in my school, look at the description box in this video. I'll leave a link to it. I have a 3-part seminar. Can't talk today. I'm so excited I can't talk. I have a 3-part series that'll teach you everything you need to know to catch more fish without spending more time on the water. It's all about being more intentional so you can catch more fish. How you feel your spool on a bait caster affects the amount of line you're taking in. You're basically changing the size of the revolution. The
Like
size
a
of the
truck,
spool,
like
rather.
truck wheels, right? Like
Yeah.
you get big giant truck wheels. You got tiny little truck wheels. It's going to change the torque or the not necessarily the torque, but the revolutions, right? You're going to feel torqueier. You're going to feel like you have more power. Essentially, you do with something smaller or a lower gear ratio. And that's always been the argument. We've had this with all of our pro staff as well, and Swindle's one to talk about it a lot. He is definitely convinced that he has, and for good reason, right? He's got more power, and so he's one of those guys that's going to flip and pitch with a 6 gear reel. Where a
Oh,
lot of
really?
guys, a lot of guys think the faster I can get it. Well, he might be moving the fish more with the reel itself versus moving the fish with the rod and vice versa. But you definitely have more power as you go down in gear ratio.
Makes perfect sense. I think the best way to make it work in layman's term, if you ever had a mountain bike when you were a kid,
Yeah.
you know how hard it is to pedal that mountain bike going up a hill. If you watch the chain, when it's hard to pedal, it's on the little bitty sprocket. And so that's what it's like. So when you're pitching and flipping, I learned that the hard way too, because you'd pitch and flip in Florida in mats and so forth, and you go to crank down. And we always try to use a fast reel because we're like, oh, I'm more efficient, more efficient. I can put it in and pick up the line real quick. But I learned really quickly that when you get one on, you need to try to pull him out, like someone was trying to explain. Like you don't have the power to move that fish out of that structure or that grass or that mat. It's almost like, think about your boat winch. Imagine
Yep.
like we can pull by hand. You can pull what, a 3,000 pound boat up on the trailer, and
Yeah.
so it's all about gearing. When you ain't that strong, bro. Like the fact that you can basically reel up and winch up a big old bass boat up on the trailer is because the gearing's right. So that all that stuff matters so much. You know, on your cast, we didn't talk about this, but at the end of your cast, make sure I'm saying it right, Ricky. You're reeling slower at the end of your cast than you are at the farthest part of your cast than you are at the your cast closest to the boat because the spool size is changing as you're reeling in the bait.
Yep, yep, you're picking up more. Yep.
You're picking up more line the closer your bait gets to the boat, which is why I argue with people about this all the time. That's why I'm so particular about my crankbaits, chatterbait, reels, because I like a slower one. Obviously, anything six is 6A, 6.3, whatever. The slowest reel I can get. I don't like the fives because it ends up working against me a lot of times when I'm moving forward. But I like anything in the sixes because with the crankbait, a lot of times, especially with shallow diving crankbait, these aren't long casts. These casts are 40 feet, 50 feet, sometimes 20 foot in front of me. And so that spool is going to be working really fast on a 751, 731, 831, 851. That spool is working. You're picking up too much line, and you think you have the ability to modulate that speed by just slowing down. But I'm telling you, the moment that your mind is off of that, which happens a lot because in bass fishing, our mind is almost always never right here where we are, you're speeding up. You're getting back into that natural cadence and you're speeding up the bait. I used to guide when I was kind of transitioning between fishing for a living and trying to make it on the tournament trail. And I watched people with like a spinnerbait or a crankbait all the time. The bait would never get they would never get 12 inches under the water because they had fast reels. They weren't paying attention to what they were doing. And so just to get that bait down to do what it's designed to do, the gear ratio definitely matters. And having the right setup will, it's going to catch you. It's going to get you extra bites because you're going to get your bait down to where you want it. I mean, and I can even go in deeper. In my opinion, especially with crankbaits. Like I throw a lot of balsa crankbaits. I think you hang more with faster reels. I think you snag more stuff, especially if you like cranking riprap or rock or any kind of bluff. That just the bait just ricochets, turns sideways, and it's gonna snag more. If I can take my time with my reel and just let that crankbait just kind of snake over logs, let it snake over rocks and boulders and things. A lot of times I can make it just roll over it. But when you're just ramming it into stuff, it'll turn sideways, and when that bait turns sideways, a lot of times it's gonna hang. So that's just my opinion on it. That's the way always been my approach to it. For me, spinning reels, 2,000 and 3,000 or 200 and 300 is however we like to package those spinning reels. For me, that's really everything you need for for bass fishing. I can tell you what the reason that I like a 2,000 versus a 3,000. I'm one of the guys I still use straight fluorocarbon on my spinning reels for certain situations. I do use braid to fluorocarbon a lot, really predominantly. There's a couple of situations I think straight fluorocarbon outperforms braid to fluorocarbon. And so when I'm using straight fluorocarbon, I'll use a bigger reel. And the reason I like that bigger reel, the 3000 series spinning reel for for fluorocarbon is just the spool is going to be bigger, so it gives me more line capacity. Secondly, with that spool being bigger, with fluorocarbon, if you think about like if you take a drop cord and you try to wrap it in a really tight bundle, it's very difficult. It has a lot of memory. And so the bigger spool being a bigger diameter, my coil of line is bigger. So it just has less memory when it's set on the reel all night or all week or however long I've spooled my reels up. I feel like it just casts a little bit better. I feel pretty comfortable saying that if you're buying a new reel, like a new spinning reel, anything in the 2000s should be, you should be able to do anything you do bass fishing with it. Is that what you would say too? You got any thoughts or recommendations or on spinning reel sizes, Ricky?
Yeah, I guess the one thing to note there is that every manufacturer is a little bit different, right? You get into those 2500 size as well, and that's kind of that
Yeah.
crossover. That's where you're playing around. Sorry, I got a low flying plane. That's normal.
Oh,
That's an,
I hear.
I don't think
That's
it's
all
gonna
good.
crash good, but um, yeah. So like that 2000, 2500, 3000 size, and like you mentioned, Brian, like just line management with a larger size arbor, a larger size spool, especially with fluorocarbon. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. But I would just take a look at that and just kind of compare sizes and really just see what fits your hand and your style the best, and how that matches up again with the rod that you're going to use as well. You know.
So I have a question about the spinning reels. I know with baitcasters we have a ton of variety when it comes to gear ratios, but I notice we never have much variety or no variety when it comes to gear ratios on spinning reels. Is it just harder to manufacture different gear ratios, or it's just not needed? What is there a reason for that? You think?
The biggest thing is going to be the size of the gear, and that's going to determine the size of the body. So you really have manufacturing and engineering restrictions just based upon the sizing that you're trying to keep that gear in, and that's the biggest reason. Obviously, a baitcaster is larger, and you're going to have a large gear set in there, and that's
Uh,
the real difference there. There's capabilities and there's ways to do it for sure. Um, um,
I get it.
5.1, 6.1, that kind of gear ratio level is pretty standard, and for good reason. It's tried, it's true, it's proven. Um, so that's a little bit the reasoning behind it.
I see. Let's talk about just the straight up difference between action and power and what those terms really mean.
So action is going to be how the rod bends, and what I mean by that is you obviously have your extra fast, your moderate fast, and then your moderate, right? So an extra fast, the majority of the way that rod's going to load is going to load in the top, I would say, quarter section of the rod at most, right? So an extra fast rod is going to load more towards the tip, and then as you move into fast, it just moves its way down the blank, right? So a moderate is going to bend, and depending on the manufacturer and depending on the power, it's gonna bend further back into the rod, like towards the front, the first guide, or the stripper guide is what we call it, right? And an
All
extra
right.
fast is going to bend again more closer to the tip. And the biggest reason that matters is depending upon the bait, the presentation, and the cover that you're fishing, right? So I think Brian can do a really good job probably here explaining what he uses and when. But the way I simplify it for myself is bottom contact style baits, or anything that I have to have really good feel with. That's going to be your extra fast and your fast.
100%.
And
Yeah.
then as anything that's moving is the variation between fast, and moderate.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty much. I like to even talk about just treble hook baits versus our single hook baits. Is a great way for me to kind of break it down and make sense just for me personally. Most of my, like Ricky said, anytime I'm dragging something or I'm what I call setting the hook, I feel the bite. I'm gonna reel down on him. I'm gonna black out in my brain, and I'm gonna set the hook on him as hard as I can. Most of the time, that's gonna be my fast, extra fast stuff. Um, but any of that stuff you're reeling along and you feel them kind of whoop, 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 load up on it, that's going to be more fast, moderate, fast stuff. Sometimes even moderate rods is what I like to use. And so to put it in layman terms, those stiffer rods is when it's going to be single hook baits, dragging a Texas rig, throwing a jig, fishing a swim jig, even sometimes like frogging, which I'm a little bit weird on that too. Sometimes I like a little bit softer rod when it comes to that. But cranking, moderate, moderate fast, um, any of that stuff, lipless, balsa baits, chatterbaits, even, which I know chatterbait's a single hook bait, but I do like somewhat of a moderate rod for that as well. So that's how I like to break it down. I don't really have a lot of variation in my rods. I honestly only have about 5 or 6 different variations.
I think people are starting to understand and realize that the amount of like sheer power that you put on these fish with the lines that we have, and the extra fast reels that we have, and all these things to be able to get your line top before you set the hook, like the times have changed a little bit, so there is definitely a demand, and you can see the trend definitely going more moderate.
It's evolved. I mean, even I think about just the way we even set the hook. Even my hook set has evolved over the years. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to do a whole bunch. I think just our rods are better. Even with the reels, like we said, that's a part of your hook set too. And there's so much more rigid. They have so much more inertia behind them when you move. You can move a fish too much. So let's just start there. Let's just make the rubber meet the road here. If you guys came to Straight Up Fishing School last year, Bobby Barrett talked about this. Bobby Barrett's in California. They catch way bigger fish than I would probably ever catch in my life. Bobby's caught countless double-digit bass, and he picked up one of my rods and said, "This is what I would use for a frog rod." It was a 7'3" medium heavy, and it was pretty soft. Like I could throw it. It was a graphite rod, but I could throw a chatterbait on it if I wanted to. And what I've learned is if you have a rod that just has too much power, it's just too stiff. It just doesn't load at all. When you go to put that torque on a hook set, you move that fish so much in your direction that the reel can't catch up with him. So now you've created slack in between you and the fish. We don't want slack. We want constant tension on that line to be able to bring him in the boat. And when you create that by either A, being too excited when you set the hook, having the wrong rod set up, you're moving him so much that now you're at a disadvantage. Also, our hooks are even better too. The hooks are
Yeah.
part of this. You know, depending on what size hook you are, like our hooks are so much better. They don't bend and torque and open like they used to. It doesn't take a big slack line hook set and all that with the equipment that we have today. You can almost just start reeling. Eye opener for me was my son. I have three kids, two boys, 11. My baby girl's not fishing, 11, and I have a 5-year-old. You can scream, holler, fuss at them all you want about setting the hook. They ain't setting it. They just reel and he's like, set hook, you got him, you got him, you got it, you got him. And they're like, okay. And they turn it like 1 mile an hour. Never lose a fish. And it's like, bro, just chill out. Give them a little reel, pull. And I promise you, like I knock on wood, fiberglass, and everything around. I don't really lose a lot of fish. Not a lot. Like since I kind of calmed down on that and really started to address my rod and reel situation in my line and really kind of know what the power of that stuff. You don't have to do as much and you'll catch more fish. Like the stuff matters.
Yeah.
When I'm finesse fishing, I don't really like to use a bait caster at all. And that reason is for the drag system. And the way I always explain it is I feel like a bait caster's drag system is made to bind and muscle, and a
Yeah.
spinning reel's drag system is designed to smoothly release line, and it just doesn't work. Is that an accurate statement? That's been my experience. I don't make reels, so to confirm, it may not be the true statement.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Depending on if you're comparing apples to apples, obviously, a 70, 60, $70 spinning reel compared to a four, five, $600 JDM bait caster. There's obviously, we're not comparing apples to apples, but a super premium spinning reel and a super premium bait caster, or vice versa, your spinning drag is definitely going to win the majority of the time.
Just talking about it, I bet if you have a BFS reel, it's almost like you, and that's probably what you're working on now. There's no way you can do the reel without doing the rod. They got
No,
to go work together. I
and
mean that's not going to work on my 7 or even like a 6'8" medium pot. It's not going. I can't imagine it really working that well.
yeah, not achieving what the whole idea is with bait finesse in general, which is being able to cast those small baits. And like you said, it goes hand in hand. You have to have the reel to be able to cast them. Going into that break conversation, you have to have the right braking system. You have to have the right spool. You have to have the right weight of the spool made of the right materials to even achieve that. And then the rod has to back it up because, like you said, if you're putting, you know, the best reel for the job with the wrong rod, it just counteract it.
So I didn't plan to get on that subject. I'm kind of glad we kind of segued into that. So we're talking about BFS is what I've heard it taught. Bait, is it bait finesse system? Is that what it's called?
Yep.
So can you explain exactly what that is? I just know it from watching YouTube videos. I really haven't heard it from a manufacturer standpoint. What is BFS?
So the simple way to describe it, it came from Japan. These guys are using super, super small baits, and the whole bait finesse system is to be able to cast and accurately place those super small baits with a bait casting setup. So your spool has to be just perfect, super lightweight. It has to have quick startup inertia. It has to have really, really precision brake systems in it. That can be either magnetic or centrifugal. Centrifugal brakes are the brakes that open up in the spool when the spool is rotating, and they actually come out of the spool. And a lot of manufacturers have different ways to do it. Some are proprietary, some are not. And then you have the magnet side as well, which is the support mechanism for the spool that slows the spool down or helps to speed it up, depending on how much magnet or centrifugal brake is used. So they can either play hand in hand, they can be independent. It just depends on the manufacturer, and it just depends on the rest of the reel and how it's engineered, right? And it has to
Gotcha.
achieve what they want, and some manufacturers do it different ways.
Gotcha. That's good to know. It took me somebody commenting on my video for me to even start researching what it was. I was doing something on drop siding or something like that, and I recommended what I use for it. And they're like, yeah, my BFS setup is what I use right now. I was like, what is a BFS? I thought he was trying to say a BPS, like Bass Pro Shops.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I was like, oh, it was a typo. And then I saw it like on another video. I was like, oh, there must be something to this. And so that's how I found out about it. I still haven't seen one in person yet. I don't know where you even pick up that stuff. It's not, which I don't very rarely go in stores or anything anymore, but I don't even know where you get that stuff from. But it seems to be a hot topic, I guess.
absolutely. And Brian mentioned here about the bearings. That's obviously a huge part of it as well. It's like everything's got to mesh. Everything's got to be perfect, right? You got to pick the right bearings and the right spin rates and all those different things to make that thing work for sure. So it's
Well,
a it's a it's a web of different directions that you can go, and ultimately I guess the Bay Finesse whole system is there to achieve precision and long casts with super light baits.
got it.